Okay, hello everyone. Welcome. We are going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining Power to Fly in our chat and learn today, where we will be talking about, is your hiring process inclusive enough? So we have some exciting content to get into today, but before that, we're going to go ahead and go into our ground rules or expectations for behavior. So number one, we want to ask you to participate. Turn your camera on. You'll show up live on the recording if you do so. And it's nice that we're just, not talking to blank screens. So we would love to see your faces. Just to note, this is being recorded. We will send an email so you can rewatch the link in a couple of days. Right in the chat, you can message me privately if you'd like to remain anonymous, and I can also ask your question. And then keep up with us on social. Follow us at Power to Fly. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Now, with all that being said, I want to intro today's speakers. So today we have Katherine McCord. Katherine McCord is an international speaker and educator who runs an inclusive-focused people operations company, Titan Management. She's also the designer and founder of Titan ATS, the first anti-bias applicant tracking system that fires the resume. Her missions are integrity, inclusion, and innovation, and she brings them into every presentation. Thank you so much for joining us, Katherine. How are you?
I am wonderful. Thank you so much for having me today.
Amazing, amazing.
I loved it. By the way, I love how just people kind of like stumble through it and you nailed it. You did such a good job.
Thank you. Look at that. Inclusivity at its finest.
That's right. That's right. We gotta embrace it as we go.
Yes, of course. So we're going to go into what we're going to take out of today's conversation, right? So our main takeaways are going to be key indicators you can evaluate on how your hiring process scores for inclusivity, strategies to start the transformation of your hiring process, and then what technologies will help you guarantee accessible hiring experience. So with all that, buckle up. Here we go. Okay, first question for Katherine. So what are some of the biggest mistakes you've seen some companies make during the process?
That is a superb question. And this is one of my favorite questions to ask because the answer is so simple. They don't listen. It's really that easy. And they don't put any actual effort into their inclusion. So there's this idea that, if you do one or two things, that's being inclusive and that you've made an effort towards inclusion, but that's actually not true. So inclusion by nature cannot be exclusive, right? You have to kind of repeat that. Inclusion cannot be exclusive. So you can't do one or two things and then declare yourself inclusive. It's not how it works. So that one of the main mistakes that companies make is that they don't listen and they don't ask. So you need to ask people what it is that they need, whether that's an anonymous survey. We'll get into all of that a little bit later. Whether it's reading articles, reaching out to people on LinkedIn who are in the know and kind of get their feedback. But you need to be asking, listening, and applying.
I love that. It's not just check a box, right? It's doing all the things that are included in the process.
All the things, which are not that many things, but it's not that hard. It's really not.
So on that, if not being as hard as we think it is, what are some of the foundations of DEIB-informed hiring processes? So what are the main do's and don'ts?
Okay, so the main do is think outside of yourself, right? I just literally did a whole speech about how being inclusive is like being a Southern hostess, right? So I grew up in this big, huge Southern family, and we love to throw parties, and nobody throws a party like a true Southerner, right? So we have all the foods that everybody likes, and we consider the seating and what's going to be comfortable. We know everybody's physical needs, emotional needs, who they like, who they don't, what they like, what they don't. And everything is just spot on, right? But it's actually easy once you're used to it and once you're used to thinking outside of yourself. So you don't throw a party and have all of your favorite snacks and your favorite everything. You think about your guests, right? Well, this is the same thing. You're thinking about the people that you're wanting to welcome in this case, the candidates. So one of the primary foundations is to make it about the candidate, to completely shift that focus, stop making it about you, make it about them. Another one is to make accommodations standard. So this is something that is a new concept. It's something that I have been piloting and preaching for years, which is now starting to really catch on. which is this idea that people shouldn't have to go through this whole long, ridiculous process or make themselves feel uncomfortable for accommodations. Accommodations should be standard. And when over 50% of the population can benefit from an accommodation, it's something you ought to be doing, right? So whether it's something for visual impairment, for auditory impairment, for a difference in how they process information, it could be a physical disability. For instance, one of my many, many diversities is that I have a seizure disorder. And so sometimes being on camera is super stressful for my body and will actually cause me to start going into seizures. So there are days when I am speaking or when I am, actually, I don't do this when I'm speaking. I just let people see it. It doesn't bother me. But when I am doing a meeting with my clients, I will ask them sometimes to be camera off. And that's just one of my accommodations that I need. You'll notice this ginormous headset that is on my head makes me look like an airplane pilot. That's there for my auditory needs. And so all of these little accommodations, they're small things. They're things that usually the person can handle themselves. I just did an interview with a gentleman who asked to do it on Zoom because he had hearing impairment and he already had his captions set up. So no big deal. And I could understand him just fine. We had a great interview. He was moved forward in the process. So make accommodations standard, easily accessed. And then I think the final step to it is continuous learning. And you have to set that up ahead of time. You have to set up the stream of knowledge early on. And that should always be anonymous. Always be anonymous. And I think we're going to jump into that a little bit more later. So I'll pause there.
I love that. It's really interesting, right? Because it's like being proactive about people's needs actually puts you a level above folks that are being reactive, and baking that into your process is only going to make your process stronger.
Yes.
I know you talked about asking folks, right? Like asking folks or surveying.
Ask
that later.
Yes.
So what indicators should we analyze to understand where we're at in terms of our process?
And that's a question I get a lot. And it's one that involves both talking to your existing people because they've been through your process, right? And they know where you're at. And then also speaking to new people. So some of the indicators, number one, look for spots where people are dropping off, right? Look for spots where all of a sudden, like, okay, we get through people through the application process, but then, or maybe they don't, maybe they stop at a certain point and then drop off. Why is that happening? What is it that's off-putting about this? Maybe they get through that, but then after the first interview, they drop off all the time. Okay, something's happening in that first interview. Something's weird. So that type of thing. So first of all, look for just the obvious indicators, where are we losing people? Look at that data. Then you want to look at your existing team and talk to your existing team. So the best way to do this to get real honest answers is, again, anonymously. You hear this a lot throughout this talk, this anonymity bit. So Survey Legend is what I prefer to use for my anonymous surveys. There are other excellent options as well, but you design your own survey, you send it out, it is completely anonymous. When it comes back, it makes a beautiful visual element. It gives you wonderful breakdowns, all kinds of things, so that you can kind of analyze the data that you've received. And I have a whole list for anybody who wants it. By the way, please do contact me. It's at one point during this, my email will be dropped into the chat. Please use that email and reach out to me if you would like a list of some of the questions that you should be asking. But you need to be reaching out, asking questions to your existing team about what's inclusive in your organization, what's inclusive in your interview process. What are some things that they feel could be better during onboarding? Because that's part of the interview process, believe it or not. People will be asking about that. That's something you're going to be considering. And then as you're getting candidates, send anonymous surveys to them. Have it triggered. And typically in an ATS, you can do this, but if not, you can kind of go through, collect their emails, and then send it out in a bulk email. And again, send out an anonymous survey. Say, hey, this is completely anonymous. We're trying to do better. What can we do? And what are some things that you would do? What can we do better? And what are just some things you would like to see that maybe other companies aren't doing? And ask. But that's kind of the best way to get a pulse and to kind of figure it out, because it's going to be different for every company. But look for places where people are dropping off, look for complaints, and also talk to your recruiters. They will know what the candidates are saying, what they're needing. And then another thing to do is to reach out to experts on LinkedIn and find out a few things. But really and truly, you're going to probably have to build from the ground up. I have seen out of over 100 companies that have approached me in the last year, I had exactly 2 that we didn't just have to basically start from scratch. So even companies that think that they're being inclusive, most have not really built out the program. So you're going to want to start at the bottom, learn everything, and then build up. But look for those indicators of drop-offs, because that is people silently telling you you are failing.
Love that. So now that you've gotten your pulse right and you understand where you're at, where do you start, right? Like you've gotten all this data and you're so overwhelmed and it seems like there's this huge mountain in front of you. Where do you start your climb?
You start it at the very beginning and rebuilding your hiring process, which is very simple. So you're going to want to do things to make sure that your compensation is inclusive and equitable, first of all. And there are some really cool tools for that. Again, if anybody's interested, feel free to reach out to me. I can make some intros, but also just basic research can do that, right? So start with that. Start with making sure that your pay is equitable. Okay. Then you're going to want to make sure that you're reaching out to candidates where they are. That's really step 2. So make sure that you've found great places. So hire.com, that's literally just what it's called. It's really not complicated. Hire.com has an option where you can filter out, and anybody who has checked that they are in a diversity category of some point, you can select that you want to hire diverse candidates. Those people will pop up so you can make sure that you're messaging them as well as everyone else. You can go to Jobs for Humanity, which is an absolutely wonderful program. It's a nonprofit organization founded by a wonderful man named Roy Bellotti. He's become a friend of mine. He's actually going to be on my show this week. But go to them. They have great resources for reaching out to diverse candidates. So that's a really great resource. So first, make sure you're getting to the people, right? And then, so make sure that those tools are in place, that type of thing. And then you're going to, again, with the standard accommodations, right? So start looking at things like, okay, this is our interview process. Keep it concise. First of all, folks, stop having 5-step interview processes for staff level positions. That's certifiably insane. 3 is the appropriate number for staff level. Then it can go up from there as needed. So as you're planning out your process, accommodations should be standard. So look at it and think, okay, so step 1, let's just say, is a Zoom interview. Great. Okay. So something that we need to let people know is maybe, would you like to have captions on? Would you like to have camera off? Would you, just kind of have some things listed out? I do have a standard accommodations list. Again, I am happy to send that out. And these are things that are just very basic. So no contact interviews are very important, even in person. And people think that that just means don't touch, which we've gotten a lot more used to during COVID, right? Which is important, but also no contact is no eye contact. And a lot of people don't realize that. So a lot of people, it actually helps them not to look at you. They'll actually kind of look up into the corner. They'll fidget with something that actually helps them think. It does not mean that they're not listening to you. They're actually doing things to actually actively help them focus. So no contact interviews, fidget interviews, so that people who have ADHD, a few other diagnoses as well, feel comfortable having their fidgets with them, especially if it's in person. Offer different ways to take notes, different technologies. For instance, I never just insist that somebody use Zoom, right? That's my preferred technology, but I do offer other options as well. Basically, I let them choose. Here's a list, because the more comfortable somebody is with the technology that they know, the better off they're going to be in the interview. So make accommodations standard. As you move through the process, make sure that this is a big one. Make sure that you are letting people, if they're coming in person to interview, make sure that you let them know the accessible features of your building and where they are. So if you have handicap parking, here's this. Maybe, and you just kind of make it a link at the interview, like, hey, just, in the email, just, hey, FYI, in case you need this, here's this link. And then just have it to where it shows, okay, here's the parking, here's the door, here's the elevators, so on and so forth. And then also give them a fill in the blank. We're inclusive here. Please tell us what we can do to make you feel more inclusive. Some things to not do, because this has been a new thing that I've seen companies doing. I don't know why. Nobody's consulted legal, very obviously. I don't think anybody actually consulted HR about this. Please do not ask people's diagnoses, sexuality, or anything else in the application process. First of all, you are looking, I'm getting some funny looks right now. Yes, this is a thing that hundreds of companies are doing, even larger companies, not mega companies, but larger companies. So you do not want to, you can do the typical EEO and ADA survey, right? Where it's just the very basic kind of legal jargon. If you want to do that, that's fine. Do not ask for their diagnosis. Do not ask their sexuality. Do not ask how they identify themselves. Not appropriate questions for the application process. They will get you sued, number one. Number two, it's actually not inclusive. It makes people feel like you're targeting them. And this has been universal. I have not talked to a single candidate that appreciated it. And I have spoken to literally hundreds of candidates about this. Please do not do that. It actually has the opposite effect. At best, it comes across as tokenism. At worst, it comes across as you are looking for a way to discriminate against me. I even saw one, this is not a joke. I even saw one that asked, are you a caregiver? In other words, basically, are you a parent? Was kind of, and they even specified that at one point. It's weird. I think that some companies are maybe trying to be inclusive with this, but it does not work. So please do not do that. But do make sure that you are not asking interview questions in the application process. That's not the appropriate time. And do keep your process concise and keep it easy to interpret. So some companies get very wordy with their application questions, or very ambiguous to where it could mean one of 3 or 4 different things. What's going to happen is you're going to get people stuck. They're going to sit there and go, okay, what are they asking for me? And they're either going to get frustrated and quit. They might say something completely bizarre because of that. So set them up for success. And then also make sure that your job descriptions are fully inclusive, which that's a whole other topic. But so kind of start going through those steps. Those are the first steps to make sure that you're doing well. So don't be weird, like in your application and things like that. Don't be weird. Don't say and do things that would make people say, I don't know you like that. That's kind of a good, if somebody could say, I don't know you like that, that's not the thing to ask or to do or say. Okay. So that's a really good line to find. And then make sure that you're making accommodation standard, make sure that you have set up the proper tools and all, and then start with your anonymous surveys. That's a really big one because that's how you're going to learn. And also set up education for you and your team. Bring in people who know about different diversities. For instance, I teach a lot on neurodiversity. I have friends who teach about racial diversity. I have friends who teach about religious diversity, all the different chromosomal diversities, which are a whole other beautiful genre of diversity. So have people come in and speak and educate, because the more education you have, the more you're just going to automatically figure out and set yourself up for success.
You just gave us so much. I mean,
sorry, I kind of rambled.
No, in the best way possible. Like, you just really broke it all down. And can I just say, I don't know you like that t-shirt. I want a button. I want all
yes. That is actually, a friend of mine said that on my show, and I was like, I'm stealing that, Cindy. Yes. I was like, that is 100% becoming one of my slogans. Is I don't know you like that.
Drop the merch. I need it.
I love it.
Awesome.
So I will.
You gave us so many amazing, like, different tools to use. Are there any other technology when it comes to the hiring process? How can we make it the most accessible?
Yes.
For folks using technology?
That is a wonderful question. And I did send you guys some contact information to go ahead and drop here. So whomever is going to help us out with that on the tech side, please go ahead and drop all that information into the chat. So what I'm having them do is the things I'm going to go over right now, they're actually going to drop you direct contact information for almost all of it, including my email, because my ATS is inclusive. So if that's something you want to talk about, you can reach out to me or use that email to reach out to me for anything else that we discuss here today. I'm always happy to make introductions for you, help you find a tool, whatever it is that you need. So what was I? Oh yeah. So the different technologies. So you have interview IA. I always want to say AI because artificial intelligence, but that's not it. It's interview IA. And what they do is they help you to make sure that you are being consistent in your interview questions, which is part of inclusivity. So you don't want to necessarily be scripted. That's kind of weird, but you'll notice I have a continuing theme of hashtag don't be weird, right? So be weird in the right ways, not the wrong ways. So interview IA, they will help you to be consistent. They will help you to ask the right questions. They will help you to ask them in an inclusive manner. And it's very inexpensive, super inexpensive. And trust me, my my client base is all startups, so I get budget. I 100% understand the budgetary restraints of a smaller company. So please use, so Interview IA is really wonderful. Again, Jobs for Humanity. That is actually free in a lot of cases. There are others where you have to pay. It just kind of depends on what you're using it for, but they are absolutely spectacular. Hired is not overly expensive. The one that I mentioned earlier, I don't have a contact for them. That's the only one I don't have a contact for, but they're really wonderful, great sourcing tool. You can use Emergy, which is a Finnish company. Actually, I was recently introduced to them, and they actually teach emotional agency. So not emotional intelligence, but how to actually use emotional intelligence and apply it. It works spectacularly for the interview process. They have some really great classes for that. I know Ira, who runs it. She is absolutely wonderful, and I recommend her highly. And then we have Inclusively, which is wonderful. They will help you make those accommodation standards. They are spectacular, well priced, have all the right motivations, really, really cool humans. Highly, highly, highly recommend them. And then there are a couple of others in there that I dropped as well.
Thank you so much. And we're going to share that with everyone. So let's go on the opposite end of the spectrum, right? So let's say budget is super, super, super limited. How can we generate real transformation without using digital tools?
So, it's funny. I have people ask me that all the time. And the truth is that while there are some wonderful tools out there, those are really only in my mind necessary if you're a mega size company. So while they're always helpful for any size company, they're only really necessary if you're like a Citibank or, Virgin Records or something like that, something really, really huge. For smaller organizations, so let's say 1,000 people or less, you should, and I do this all the time for myself and for my clients, you should be able to build everything out by spending, I would say, $75 or less a month. And that includes just everything. So it's really just a matter of putting in the processes. So one thing that I use when I schedule interviews is I use my Calendly link. And on Calendly, I have developed specific questions that allow for inclusivity. So I let people know the different technology options, things like that, and just kind of list all that out. That's a great way to be inclusive, is to include that in your calendar invite for your interviewing. It gives them a chance to tell me anything that they need. Also, when you're sending out the emails to candidates, make sure that you have a link to your standard accommodations where they can let you know what they need. You can do that with a survey form. You can just have a PDF and they just let you know what they need. However you want to do that, have a link to your accessibility functions. That's very important. And then the survey legend, I believe they even have a free version. They did. I don't know if they still do, but they did as of about a year ago. They did have a free version. And then even if you're paying, it's something like $20 a month for unlimited surveys. So you could just send out and you can survey your people, your candidates, and you can get that really rich feedback that I was talking about. And then after that, really, it's just forming the right processes and procedures, right? So maybe as a one-off, pay somebody to like myself or one of my colleagues, depending on what it is specifically that you're looking for, to send you, hey, this is what I do. This is what I've already invented for this. Take it and run. A lot of people have kind of like a preset form that they'll hand out. I do it with all of my classes. I kind of tell people like, here's what I'm doing. Take it and do whatever you want to do with this. And so anybody, by the way, today that is interested in that, please do reach out to me. I'm going to count this as a class. So if you want to see what I'm doing, there you go, free resource. And it's not horribly specific, but it will give you the right guidelines. So that's kind of the way to build it, is just look at the simple ways. Use your email and have links, use the surveys and have organize classes. And one thing you can do if you don't have a budget to bring in teachers is find the LinkedIn lives that are relevant. Find LinkedIn lives about neurodiversity. Find Sharon Hurley Hall is one of my favorites. I'm going to say her name again, Sharon Hurley, Hurley, and then Hall. She does some spectacular work about anti-racism and about inclusion, racial inclusion and female inclusion gender inclusion. And she has the most empathetic, beautiful approach to that of anybody that I've ever seen. And in fact, she's completely changed my vocabulary when talking about those topics. I admire her to the moon and back. Future Kane is another great educator. You can find free events with her. Mark Travis Rivera does a lot for LGBTQIA and also for physically diverse education. He's another wonderful asset. If you want introductions to any of these people, just let me know. Tara Furiani does things. She's a little bit more edgy. Love her to death, but she is a little bit more edgy. So you do have to kind of be open to that. But there are free lives. I do free lives. HR Disruptor is a group that does free lives with free education. Find those free events and sign all your people up and do the free education. So there's always a cheat to save a buck.
I love that. I feel like there's ways to kind of fine tune the tools that you're already using, starting there and then building from there. Like that should be standard practice, right? Like
yeah,
what you're already doing.
Yeah, just fix it and then find the free education. It's everywhere. Yeah. It's everywhere right now.
Yeah. And also take a look at Power to Fly. We have education here all the time. So feel free to come back.
Absolutely. I forgot to plug you guys. I'm sorry. That was super rude.
I got you. So as HR leaders, right? So how do we ensure that, now that we've done all the work, it really goes on to our recruiters now, right? So how do we ensure that those recruiters have that DEIB approach during the process?
First of all, make sure they actually know how to interview. All right, that's going to sound ridiculous, but I cannot tell you how many recruiters I've run into that don't actually understand how to interview. If you would like help with that, reach out to me. I do recruiting classes. Occasionally, I even do a free one. The rest of the time, they're extremely affordable because that's just sort of one of my ways to give back, because I think that the more that we improve recruiting, the better off we'll be as a society and especially in the workplace. So make sure they actually know how to interview appropriately. Make sure that they understand. You can go to Allison courses. I think it's just one L, but don't hold me to that. But Allison courses, they have a free certification that you can get to make sure that they understand EEOC and ADA laws and the basics of interviewing. And they actually get a certification for that, by the way, and it's free. So there you go. So use Allison courses. They have a few things like that to kind of help out. Be very careful with LinkedIn Learning. Very careful. Let me stress that. Some of the people on there are great. Some of them, I think they're just potatoes. I don't know. I don't know what's gone on with them, but it's just not good quality education. So be very careful with that, but make sure that they know how to interview. Then they need the education. So whether it's free stuff, find shows that people do on LinkedIn Live that are free, find the free education, HR Disruptor, things like that. Reach out to me if you want a list of people to follow and specific lives to listen to. I do have one. I will send it to you. Make sure that they have that. Make sure that they have the knowledge, they understand. Also, there are tests that you can give them to help test for where their holes are and their bigotry. So, and their biases and things like that. Sejal Thakar does some wonderful work there. I can point you to her testing and a few others, again, free. So don't worry, I'm not going to stress out your budget. So make sure that they understand where their biases are and then help them figure out how to get past them. And then past that, it's really just building out the culture. It's really just building out that environment of inclusivity. So teaching them the difference between tokenism and diverse hiring, and then just continued education, the more that you can give them. I've been recommending to clients that at least once a week, that their people are required to participate in at least a 30-minute online webinar or coaching or live session, whatever, that will help them stay on the right track. But those surveys again will come into play, because your candidates will tell you when you're sending out surveys, and it may not even be something that the person is doing intentionally. So make sure your recruiters understand, like, I'm not trying to catch you do something like you're doing something wrong. I just want to make sure that we don't have any holes in our knowledge, right? So just kind of present it to them that way and send out those anonymous surveys to every candidate, because they're going to tell you. And when you see 3 or 4 people say, this person said this that made me uncomfortable, or this person was doing this and I didn't like it, that will tell you that some more training is needed, and then you just teach them.
I love that. It's like not leading with a shame and blame. It's like, how do we give you all the resources so you can do what
yes, because you can't know everything. I still am learning stuff all the time, and I teach this stuff. You've got to constantly be learning. So don't shame and blame them. Just let them know we're doing this so we don't have holes in our knowledge, and so that we can continually improve and make our lives better.
Right.
Simple.
So after we're kind of like following the candidate experience, right? So we've gone through, we've met with recruiters. Now we've got an offer out, we've accepted, we're going to onboarding now. So what does inclusive onboarding look like, and how can we supervise managers who are following its implementation?
Okay. All right. That's a good question. So onboarding, it is extremely important. And I have seen so many companies lose candidates in onboarding. And here's what I mean by that. You might be thinking, well, we've never lost a candidate in onboarding. We must be doing so well. Not so fast. What I mean by that is they never quit looking. So yeah, they might make it through onboarding. They may even last another year with you, but they never quit looking for that next opportunity. So it's extremely important that you keep that you get the onboarding right. So the first thing that I would say is, again, with the standard accommodations, ask them. I have a whole list of, here's some equipment options that we can offer you. Here's some different app options we can offer you, lighting, all of this kind of stuff. So, and none of the stuff is expensive. None of it, in fact, some of it costs less than the normal stuff that you use. So you send that out, make sure that they have that, make sure that everything is set up for them. That's extremely important. So there's nothing worse, and this is true universally, but especially for neurodiverse people. And neurodiversity, if you do not know, simply means that you have a visible or medically visible way, a different way of processing information. So things like ADHD, autism, bipolar disorder, certain forms of epilepsy. These are types of dyslexia. These are types of neurodiversity. So especially for that group, but really for everybody, coming into a new job and not having things ready is extremely disheartening and stressful. So you need to have their equipment ready. You need to have their training ready. You need to be introducing them to people. If they come in and it's just pure chaos, that doesn't help anybody. So, and it can also feel exclusive. For instance, I have seen companies where some people had a chaotic experience and some didn't. And maybe the certain people that had a good experience were men, or maybe they were a certain race, or maybe they were a certain religion, or maybe they didn't have a physical diversity, but then these other people that struggled did, and it's just a bad look. And it was just pure coincidence of who had a good experience and a bad, but it can also look really bad and make people feel that you didn't care about them. So you want to, and not just from the comparison, but also just from, okay, really, like you didn't even care enough about me to do this. How am I going to tell you when I need an accommodation? So it breaks the trust kind of right away. So make sure that everything is prepared. Then you're going to want to make sure that they have access to everything in a way that works for them. So ask them what their favorite style of communication is. What works best for them? Are they visual? Are they auditory? Are they kinetic? And always present information when you don't know. So this applies to your job postings. This applies to your interview communication. This applies to your onboarding communication. There is a table, which again, I'm glad to send to you guys, of the different forms of communication that are important that can actually help people to better connect to the information that you're giving them, such as using visual elements, auditory, links, and then also different, and using bullet points to be more concise and organized, things like that. So I'll send you the communication chart if you would like it, but be sure to use that. Ask them how they like to be communicated with. And there are also some wonderful tests. I do not like personality tests at all during the interview process. They're extremely exclusive. Please, it's another do not use them. But once you have brought people on board and you are onboarding them, this is a great opportunity to learn how they communicate. So this is a great opportunity to go out and find a tool that will help you learn how they communicate better and how to best work with them, how to best teach them. So use those kind of tools, bring them in, and then from there, just ask for those accommodations, those types of things. Have touch points, have a set schedule. So when you come in day one, this is what's going to happen. Day two, this is what's going to happen. Then maybe after a week, we're going to have a touch point and see how we're doing with things. And then at 30 days, this is going to happen. And keep everything very consistent for everybody. That's a huge part of inclusivity, is consistency, and yet somehow flexibility, right? So be flexible in your consistency.
I love that. So let's go on the other side of it, right? What are some examples of companies who are just really killing it in the inclusive hiring process?
I actually just featured one of my clients who blew me away with their inclusivity efforts when they brought me in. I was only brought in to help with their talent acquisition. They were having some struggles there, not about inclusivity, but just in general. And so I came in to consult there, and I was blown away by this company's inclusivity efforts. And that is a company called Syncro. That is SYNCRO. There we go. And they are absolutely phenomenal. I highly, highly recommend following them. They actually have some great social media stuff that they're doing, things like that. If you want an intro to them, feel free to reach out. I will make an introduction to them. You can ask them all the questions you want. And then also, I just did an episode of my show Career Launch Live with them. So you can go back and watch that. They were spectacular. That was just a couple of weeks ago. Another one, oh gosh, who's really impressive. Actually, I just did a post about this today. Virgin Records, now Virgin Atlantic, Virgin Media, whatever direction of the brand you want to go. Richard Branson's companies are spectacular with their inclusion. I have yet to poke a hole. I've read through their employee reviews. I've talked to people. I have studied, and I've been a fan of his for a long time. And they've done a spectacular, wonderful job of inclusion. I highly, highly recommend reaching out to them, including, and this is another good one for an onboarding tip, they recently degendered their uniforms. So now it's not women wear this, men wear this. It's wear whatever makes you comfortable. Here's our uniforms, pick one, whatever you think is pretty, wear it, and that, or whatever you're comfortable in, wear it. And I absolutely love that. That's something that I encourage companies to do all the time, is not to gender their dress codes if they have one, but to just make very general guidelines across the board.
That's amazing. Yeah, a lot of companies, I think I noticed that an airline was doing that with their uniforms. So I'm glad you got that.
That's them. Yeah, that's Virgin Airways. Yeah.
So we actually had a question that came up in the chat, and I want to address it. So we talked about surveying candidates about their experience, right? But then how do we analyze the data if a candidate doesn't make it and they give us a bad review, or they made it through the whole entire process and we have glowing reviews? How do we analyze that data?
Okay. So the way when I go into a client that I start looking at this type of data before we get into the anonymous surveys and things like that, the public data, right? The reviews and all of that. So the way that you have to look at it is, you look for patterns. Is there a one-off that maybe you need to kind of look at, or have 5 different people said the exact same thing or some variation of it? So patterns are the number one indicator that there's a serious problem. Look at also the language in public reviews. So are they obviously just mad that they didn't get the job? And they're just kind of throwing a fit, and maybe there's some truth in there, and maybe there's some exaggerations. We need to kind of be careful how we look at it. Not that you would dismiss those, but you have to look at them through a different lens, right? So kind of what I call this, the sassy scale. You have to kind of rate their sassiness level. And if they're more practical, that's a more solid review to pay attention to. You can put a lot more stock into it. If it's a lot more sassy, then even on the positive side, even if it's that they're just glowing, okay, but did they get the job? Is that why they're just walking on air from that? Just ride the emotional scale a little bit with them. But patterns are the main thing. But going back to the, when you're looking at all the data and you're putting it together, one of the things that a lot of people miss are the subtleties. So if somebody outright tells you someone's made a racist comment to me, or somebody did something that was not disability friendly, or whatever, those things are overt. That's an obvious indicator. The subtle indicators are what you have to learn. And that's really a honed skill. That would be a whole other class just in and of itself. But basically what you're looking for are read between the lines. So if somebody says, I didn't feel comfortable in my interview, okay, you need to reach out. If somebody says, this is not a family-friendly workplace, okay, something happened that was discrimination against them as a parent. If somebody says something about, it's the hectic communication and how you didn't get back to me and it took so long and none of the deadlines were met, you're not being neurodiverse inclusive. That is probably in all likelihood a neurodiverse person who needs things. Okay, if you tell me this, then that's what needs to happen. So you need to look at that. You're not being neurodiverse friendly. So a little bit of reading between the lines and learning to interpret. And that's really just a honed skill. But there are actually some cool AI things out there that can help, tools out there that can help with that as well.
I love that, giving us highlighted themes that we can kind of dig into as we look at the data.
Yeah.
So I know we're about to wrap up. So my final question is really, where do you see the future of DEIB evolving in this space?
The future of DEIB. I would love it if one day all of this was so natural and we just didn't need to talk about it anymore. That would make me so happy. Like not like this anyway. No, not like, I wish that it was just something that was so inherent that it was just learning each other's preferences and that was all the learning that there was to it. But that's probably not going to happen in reality. So the future of DEIB is going to be complicated. And that's the sad, what I consider to be a very accurate answer, is that you're going to have the people that push up against it. You're going to have the people that don't get it. And that's tough. That is really, really tough, because then you have to choose to take the moral high ground, even if that means losing your top sales guy, firing this manager that just doesn't get it, losing some customers along the way. That's what this can mean sometimes. And it's frustrating and it's hard. But the great part that comes afterwards, it's so much better when you go through it. So I think the future of DEIB is going to be people learning to take a stronger stand, learning to have guts when it comes to their DEIB. And I think that it's going to be a lot more just getting to know each other, which that's the really cool part. I think there's going to be a lot more just like kind of, I was like at this, like, I just want to see everybody, be like my pit bull who just runs up to everybody and is like, hi, what you doing? What's going on? Tell me everything about you. He just is so excited to meet everybody. And I'm kind of the same way. Like I have the same mentality. The second I meet somebody, I need to know everything about them. And I think that that's going to be a lot more of our hiring process, is getting to know more about the humans along the way. I think that's really what this is going to lead to, which is better hiring anyway. I've been preaching that for years. That part's really super exciting. But it's also going to be a lot of strapping in for some uphill battles. And that's frustrating, but it's true. And I will say this, if you have someone who's just not getting it, fire them. Because it's not going to get better. That's a tough answer. Nobody wants to hear it, but it's true. Fire them. That's just it. There's not going to be a fixing it. They don't want to get it. And also, I will say this too, on that same line, you're going to have the people that will tell you that part of inclusion is that they don't have to honor other people's diversities. No, the very simple reply to that, because I get this all the time, both on LinkedIn and in consulting, well, also and in teaching. So from 3 different standpoints. Whenever somebody says to you, well, it's not inclusive for you to make me use somebody's different pronouns or to respect their religion or whatever. The way that you explain that to them is, this is about inclusivity. So that this means that you get to be you. What you don't get to do is inflict your way onto other people. That's it. You get to be you over here and have your own thing going on, but you don't get to inflict that onto other people. But the future of DEIB is going to be frustratingly beautiful. That's how I see it going. But it's going to lead to a lot more conversations and a lot more getting to know humans. And that's the cool part, because that's the part that leads us to better success, better customer reviews, better innovations, and better integrity and more money.
Yes, I love that. There's hope in the future. It's a complicated, beautiful mess. But we're so excited to see what it's going to be. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us all of this knowledge. We're going to share out those tools that you talked about to our participants. Thank you for joining us, everyone. If you were joining also for SHRM credit, our ID today is 22MRVWE. Thank you so much for Power to Fly, and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Feel free to connect.